Hey, it's been fun to be involved with this. If you talk about cardiac extracellular matrix and myocardial infarction remodeling, I'm right at home. But as soon as you say big data, in a way, I'm like a little kid in a candy store because it's intriguing to me, and I've enjoyed the last 2 days. I've been playing with Reactome, and I've been playing with some other tools. I'm the quintessential biologist. If it's not easy, then I'm not going to look at it. But if it is something that makes me exciting, then I'll keep looking at it. And back when I first started working with computers, I was the one who put the floppy disk drive in backwards, upside down, in the A drive. And so I think I'm a perfect guinea pig. If the tool doesn't work with me, it's probably not going to work with anyone. And so from that perspective, I feel like I'm being educated as much as I'm helping to get my fellows addicted to the idea of big data and looking at large cohorts. And so in addition to being interested in the Jackson Heart Study cohort, we also have a huge database of mouse data from our proteomics center that just ended funding a week ago. And so we've been tagging on this to try to reanalyze some of the data that we've been acquiring over the last 5 years. And so there's two components to the educational part of this big data grant. One is here at UCLA that Carol Watson is running, and the second one is in Jackson, which I am heading. And so it's interesting because we're running in parallel. We're not doing the same things necessarily, but we're learning from each other. And so the UCLA branch is focused on clinician scientists, MD PhDs, and helping to get them their careers off and running. Whereas the Jackson one, we're focusing on two things. One is PhDs, mostly biologists, who really wouldn't do these kind of projects if we weren't giving them the impetus to do it. And then second is I've had a long-standing interest in training high school and undergrads and getting them interested in research careers. And so we have a very active high school and college program where kids come in the summer for 8 to 12 weeks and hang out with us. So I'll tell you a little bit about the UCLA. Carol Watson gave me a few slides to present. And so the Data Science Cardiology Fellowship that is ongoing here is part of the Specialty Training and Academic Research, the STAR program, that has been ongoing at UCLA for quite a while. This is a unique program that's designed to basically help physician scientists right at the end of their training and beginning of their academic careers is when they're most vulnerable to being lost to the clinical. Why are we laughing? It's true, right? Being lost to the clinical community. And so this is the time when it's probably the best to intervene and try to help it take down barriers. And so Carol has enrolled 4 STAR fellows. Stefan Richter is an MD who was trained at University of Michigan and did residencies at Tufts and is board certified. Naresh how do you say your last name? Ramarajan. Most of you guys saw his posters yesterday. He was one of the finalists for the 8 poster presentations that we'll hear later. He's just a highly energetic fellow who has some really great ideas for how to translate some of the stuff he's doing in cancer into the cardiac community. Jessica Wong received her MD from University of Pennsylvania and did a residency in Dallas, and she's also board certified. And then Tamer Salong, who trained at UC Irvine and did a residency at Yale. He's another finalist for the posters from yesterday, and so you'll get to hear from both of those 2 individuals later on today. In Jackson at the University of Mississippi Medical Center, Christine de Leon Canal and Ragmani Iyer are 2 PhD fellows in my laboratory who have been working a lot with databases particularly, and the whole concept of cleaning the database, making the database ready to be used is something that's just really been foreign to us up until the past year. And so both of them have been getting experience. Romani's been working with the Jackson Heart Study database, the subsample cohort that we have that we're going to be doing proteomic analysis on. She's been getting all that data into a way that we can easily access it. Carol's reached out to Spelman College, which is in Atlanta, and has plans to recruit a cohort of undergraduate scholars for summer programs, either at UCLA or at UMC. At UMC, we have quite a few programs already up and running, so it will be easy to tag in with those. And then also, Carol and I have been working on ways to integrate data science education into undergraduate education. And there's also been training collaborations with USC, Dr. Paul Thompson of the Enigma Center for Worldwide Medicine and Dr. Arthur Toga of the Big Data for Discovery Science Center is working with Pepe and others at this center to develop a program to jointly train PhD students. If I was going back to grad school today, I would definitely be getting all the bioinformatics training that I could, and that's what I always tell trainees when I meet with them. Pepe alluded to my work with American Physiological Society and experimental biology. Last year we had 2 workshops, one a big data workshop. Jenny Larkin came up to Boston and moderated with me, and so we had Helen Berman, Susanna Santa Sanson, and Chris Wilson give presentations at that meeting, and those were all highly receptive. Everyone who was in attendance were physiologists, and so this was a good way to get biology folks starting to think about big data. We also had a proteomics workshop geared at helping the physiologists to understand why they should be thinking about doing proteomics and other big data sets when they have their animal models or their human models. And so Bishu Adhikari from NHLBI moderated that with Jesse Weinhardt. So Kevin Shai, Lysandra DeCastro-Bras, and Yufeng Jin and Paul Welling all gave presentations there. Lysandra trained at our proteomics center, and then she went off. It says UMC there, but she was actually at East Carolina by the time she presented on how to interact with the core. And so those were 2 workshops that we gave to try to help physiologists and biologists start thinking about big data. In addition, there's been a lot of tutorial training. You know, like I said earlier, biologists, it doesn't, you know, we don't know what R means. You know, you guys know what that means, and you know what even Python I just learned recently. And so these kind of tutorial trainings that we can take and help us to take our real data sets and then get figures that make sense to us is, I think, a key for translating. Because we can have 5,000 tools, but if biologists aren't using them, you might as well not have any. And so we're going to hear a few updates from some other folks that are affiliated with the Big Data Center here. And so Chris Lee has an R25 for open sharing active learning tools online. And then Matteo Pellegrino and then Alex and Alexander Hoffman have a T32 on biomedical big data training grant. And then there's also minority supplements to the T32. And so I think Chris is going to, okay.
Great. Thank you, Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Questions, open response questions. It's much easier to write an open response question than it is to write a so-called multiple choice concept inventory question, and it really speeds up the process of creating a concept inventory. A second major aspect of our platform is that it's built-in capability for randomized trials as a way of testing what works versus what doesn't, what works better, what works worse. Traditionally, in higher education, randomized trials are actually a pretty rare standard to achieve because it's hard to do that in the classroom. You can't randomize your students to, you're going to take this class, or you're going to take that class, or you're going to get this textbook, you're going to get that textbook. Whereas online, this becomes something that you can do really fast. You've got 30,000 students in a MOOC, and you are running a e-learning platform that can do randomized trials just built into how they're answering questions. You could get the numbers that you need to complete a randomized trial on a specific comparison of method A versus method B probably in the next hour, okay? So we're already fully IRB approved on this and ready to go. One last thing I'll mention as a synergy for the BD2K community is that, traditionally when somebody out there solves one of these key learning problems for BD2K, in other words, I had this misconception, and then I studied the following material, and now I understand it. It fixed my misconception. That information, that discovery, doesn't transfer to anybody else. It's lost basically as fast as it's found. Right? Like one person learns it, it never transfers to anybody else. So the platform that we've built basically makes that transfer completely automatic because all materials are attached to universal concept IDs, basically from Wikipedia, which is fully integrated into this, through the ARMLs and resolutions, which I'm not going to have time to talk about. But basically, this is a sharing platform where everybody who's working on a particular concept, even if this person's in statistics, this person's over in physiology, this person's in computer science, if they're connecting, working on the same concept, they're all going to see each other's insights and lessons about how to learn that concept, okay? So you could think of this as building a persistent learning community unified by concepts. So why not? Wherever BD2K meets the necessity of training, why not plug into such a data-driven synergy platform? It's basically a place where the community can work together. I just want to end with some obvious challenges for us. We recognize this is probably too different from what people are used to be easy for them to take up. People are busy. They don't have time for new stuff, right? So we're quite worried about this. We've got a lot of strategies that we're doing to try to address this. For example, we will work directly with anybody who wants to use this process. We'll try to write open response concept tests for you if that's what you want. But I really feel that this is a place where NIH could play a major role, and I'll try to highlight 3 places that I think could be powerful, basically because we're worried, we're not going to have uptake because it's just too different. One idea is this crucial category of concept inventories. BD2K needs concept inventories, but I'm not aware of any specific efforts to really build that. So why not create concept inventory hackathons of the kind that we're going to be doing internally next month? Second, the randomized trials approach. It seems to me that bringing that kind of what works empirical power tool to everything we're doing would be really powerful for this field. And finally, just creating a broad set of active learning materials of this open response concept test form, which is sort of the easiest category I've seen for being able to rapidly create. It would be great, I think, to be able to organize and fund groups to actually explicitly produce this kind of content. I do want to emphasize that we are not funded to do that. We're building the platform. We're not creating the content. I don't think any of these 3 categories, at least as far as I'm aware, is either organized or funded for people to do this. So I'll just end there and take any questions from you. So I'd like to focus mainly on the synergies with other BD2K grants. First of all, with the other R25s, I want to emphasize we're the only R25 that was funded to build a new e-learning platform, which I have learned is a gigantic endeavor, but we're basically done with that. So with the other R25s, they're providing MOOCs, and what we are trying to synergize with them is basically activate your MOOC with active learning, because we've built this platform to seamlessly integrate with any of the existing e-learning platforms that they're already using, like edX or Coursera. Basically, from the student's point of view, it's completely transparent whether they're in Coursera or they're answering questions in our system. A second way that we're trying to synergize is actually internally with the T32 that Matteo is going to be talking about in a moment. I want to focus your attention on an interesting category called a concept inventory, which is basically in the educational literature recognized as the gold standard for how you define a set of desired learning outcomes by actually providing a measurement of those learning outcomes. It's a test, basically, that operationally measures, have you achieved the kind of conceptual learning that you want to have. Traditionally, unfortunately, this is a so-called $1 million instrument. In other words, it costs $1 million and takes multiple years to build a concept inventory for a single class. Why is that? Because it is traditionally a long, laborious human process of doing interviews with students, asking them, well, what were you really thinking on this question, and so on. I want to point out, open response concept testing just takes that whole process online. We're collecting those data just directly through the process of learning in the classroom or online. We're able to just directly identify the kinds of errors and so on. So our first goal here is actually, as a group with the T32 faculty, in mid-September, we're going to have a concept inventory hackathon, where we basically create our favorite concepts questions, open response questions. It's much easier to write an open response question than it is to write a so-called multiple choice concept inventory question, and it really speeds up the process of creating a concept inventory. A second major aspect of our platform is that it's built-in capability for randomized trials as a way of testing what works versus what doesn't, what works better, what works worse. Traditionally, in higher education, randomized trials are actually a pretty rare standard to achieve, because it's hard to do that in the classroom. You can't randomize your students to, you know, you're going to take this class, or you're going to take that class, or you're going to get this textbook, you're going to get that textbook. Whereas online, this becomes something that you can do really fast. You know, you've got 30,000 students in a MOOC, and you are running an e-learning platform that can do randomized trials just built into how they're answering questions. You could get the numbers that you need to complete a randomized trial on a specific comparison of method A versus method B probably in the next hour, okay? So we're already fully IRB approved on this and ready to go. One last thing I'll mention as a synergy for the BD2K community is that, you know, traditionally when somebody out there solves one of these key learning problems for BD2K, in other words, I had this misconception, and then I studied the following material, and oh, now I understand it. It fixed my misconception. That information, that discovery, doesn't transfer to anybody else. It's lost basically as fast as it's found. Right? Like one person learns it, it never transfers to anybody else. So the platform that we've built basically makes that transfer completely automatic, because all materials are attached to universal concept IDs, basically from Wikipedia, which is fully integrated into this, through the ARMLs and resolutions, which I'm not going to have time to talk about. But basically, this is a sharing platform where everybody who's working on a particular concept, even if, you know, this person's in statistics, this person's over in physiology, you know, this person's in computer science, if they're connecting, working on the same concept, they're all going to see each other's insights and lessons about how to learn that concept, okay? So you could think of this as building a persistent learning community unified by concepts. So why not? Wherever BD2K meets the necessity of training, why not plug into such a data-driven synergy platform? It's basically a place where the community can work together. I just want to end with some obvious challenges for us. We recognize this is probably, you know, too different from what people are used to be easy for them to take up. People are busy. They don't have time for new stuff, right? So we're quite worried about this. We've got a lot of strategies that we're doing to try to address this. For example, we will work directly with anybody who wants to use this process. We'll try to write open response concept tests for you if that's what you want. But I really feel that this is a place where NIH could play a major role, and I'll try to highlight 3 places that I think could be powerful, basically because we're worried, we're not going to have uptake because it's just too different. One idea is this crucial category of concept inventories. BD2K needs concept inventories, but I'm not aware of any specific efforts to really build that. So why not create concept inventory hackathons of the kind that we're going to be doing internally next month? Second, the randomized trials approach. It seems to me that bringing that kind of what works empirical power tool to everything we're doing would be really powerful for this field. And finally, just creating a broad set of active learning materials of this open response concept test form, which is sort of the easiest category I've seen for being able to rapidly create. It would be great, I think, to be able to organize and fund groups to actually explicitly produce this kind of content. I do want to emphasize that we are not funded to do that. We're building the platform. We're not creating the content. I don't think any of these 3 categories, at least as far as I'm aware, is either organized or funded for people to do this. So I'll just end there and take any questions. And I should have mentioned this URL, coursesplits.org. Okay. That's sort of our initial public version. You can take a look at it. We haven't managed to load much content into there yet, but that's the starting point. And we will definitely write that report for you.
That would be very helpful.
So one point that I forgot to make is that this sharing concept, one of the things that I think is really a great potential is the idea that you do remixes. In other words, anybody can come along and remix some selection of materials, which they can also, modify a bit, customize. We've kind of built into this as sort of a GitHub-like version control with branching and so on, so that people can modify each other's materials. And the place that's really is valuable is audience-customized courses. I mean, right now, if you wanted to produce something specifically for cardiologists, say, or physiology people, it's an enormous amount of work to create a new course. But in reality, 80% of that, it has overlap to other courses where you draw something from here and draw something from there. So if you can remix and you can adjust, suddenly that becomes worthwhile. So I would say that the place it will probably start is we want to give people an easy way to just, add one exercise to your class. You don't need to change your class. Just try using some active learning, using tools that make it really easy to do that. And then I think over time, there are going to be interesting things like remixes and so on that become possible when you have basically community sharing. And I want to emphasize, this idea of sharing, you could think of it as sort of teaching as publication. In other words, somebody makes a teaching material, like an exercise. Somebody else is looking at all the materials that are available to them from textbooks, from whatever, and they say, oh, this material is what I'm going to use in my class. That's peer review, right? Out of all the things in the world, they chose this as what they're going to use. And if they do that again next year, it shows that it worked. So that's kind of where we're trying to go with this. We've definitely looked at some of the sources of that, basically repositories of that kind of material. We've been too buried in building the platform to reach out yet. But very much what we're trying to create here is a sort of data federation model where materials, if the instructor approves it, basically says, I want this to be public, the materials just flow across the federation to whoever wants to use it in whatever kind of platform. And we're not trying to be sort of a walled garden that captures people's materials. So that's definitely where we want to go, but we're not there. So in the original R25, we have a bunch of partners signed up for pilot projects. So the idea is basically to work so closely with them that they, they can't fail. Basically, we have to write their materials for them.
Absolutely.
We'll do that.
Make the bar low.
So just do that with a few people here at UCLA and at our partner institutions. And in the process, basically capture that entire process through screencasts and tutorials. And, we do this hackathon. Again, we'll try to capture that as sort of screencast so that the whole process is transparent. Other people can look at that and say, oh, I think I could do that. But I think that this is going to be a process of learning for example, right now, we have a usability expert that we just brought into this process who's going to do usability studies with our initial users and really try to smooth the rough places and so on. But it's I think exactly as you say, we've got a long road ahead of us. The easiest place for somebody to start would just be to say, well, I'm pretty happy with my courses that exist now, but I want to improve conceptual understanding, so I'd like to start trying to add some of these kind of conceptual active learning exercises, and I want to make that really easy for my students so that basically just within the MOOC platform they're already using, they just click on one of these exercises that I give them, and it's going to just send them straight into being able to do this. So I think that's where we would start. But maybe I should also explain the name Courselet. The idea was that we feel that oftentimes what people want from this kind of learning is not to go back to school and take like a whole course, but rather they have a specific problem they're trying to solve, and they want to learn how to use one concept now. So that's what the idea of a courselet is. It's in one sitting, ideally, learn how to use this concept where it really means learn because you're actually going to use it on real-world problems. So that's not necessarily something that we're going to tell like somebody who's already got a MOOC that they have to do that right now because it's a slightly different mindset. But as materials start to build up within this sharing platform, it becomes easier and easier to produce those kinds of things. And I've got one example on the site. I think there's a button that says check it out that walks you through sort of an example of trying to teach one new concept, namely conditional probability for my intro theory students. So that might give you some kind of sense of how we try to basically equate a courselet to learning one new way of thinking in one sitting.
Have you included or have you considered including any gamification features in this platform?
That's a really, really neat idea. We've definitely talked about it, but we're not there yet. That's the thing I kind of realized about this project. It's just like the infinite project. No matter how much you do, it's like anybody can in 60 seconds immediately tell you things that are like 10 times more than you've already done, like what you just did. So, I mean, with our usability expert, we are talking about things that are kind of like that. We're basically talking about, well, how do you make this essentially a purely social platform? In other words, that learning is a social interaction, and the one way of lowering the barrier to entry, the fear factor for students, is to make it basically a social interaction, and things like leaderboards or sort of gamification, as you were saying, I think are really interesting directions for trying to do that. We're going to do A/B testing, basically, to measure through randomized trials effectively what works better versus worse with students.
Okay. Thank you so much, Chris.
We've just started this new training grant this year and have just recruited our new class, so we're excited to see how this evolves. So the goal of this training grant is basically, as one can imagine, is to train students in the analysis of big data with a biomedical bent. So we're really trying to focus at the interface between big data sets and clinical data. So our mission is clearly the professional development of graduate students in the analysis of these large biomedical data sets. We have a focus on various translational activities that combine genomics with clinical data. So there were, obviously, UCLA has many training grants and certain training grants also in genomics that have been going on for many years. And so the one area that wasn't covered by these programs that the BD2K initiative really lets us complete is this intersection of genomics and clinical data, which is obviously a growing opportunity and an exciting area of research for many of our graduate students. So that's really what we want to focus on. And to do this, the concept is to have students be trained by multiple PIs, and so there obviously has to be a PI with a critical focus on big data, bioinformatics, data analysis, and then another PI with more of a focus on the medical side of things. Could be a clinical PI or somebody with a direct involvement in the collection and interpretation of the clinical data. So when we presented the grant, we thought of many data sets that were available at UCLA that would, wonderful opportunities for graduate students to do PhD research in. And these are just some examples. UCLA has lots of initiatives to study neurogenomics. We have data on bipolar disorder, depression, autism. There's sort of a large group of researchers that are focusing on collecting genomes and other types of genomic data associated with these neural disorders. And then we have large efforts here on campus to do lung cancer, breast cancer. And these data sets can be of very different data types. There could be sort of sequence data associated with genome sequencing or RNA sequencing or epigenomes. There could also be data associated with medical imaging and how to analyze that. And there's also the data associated with, as we heard from previous talks, is sort of how to extract information from medical records, text mining, other types. So really, we're trying to span all these different very large data sets. And as you can see from the last column on the right, these data sets are truly massive. So I mean, the scale on which we're collecting both sequence data and image data, as well as text data, is just growing very rapidly. So it's creating new paradigms for teaching students and what kind of tools that they need to actually do these types of projects. So when we conceived of this training grant, we were really partially building off of what we had already been doing for the past few years. So as Alex mentioned, Chris had started a bioinformatics graduate program nearly 10 years ago. We initiated that process. And over the years, this graduate program has been growing. We have our most recent classes have 10 students coming in. And so these are perfect candidates for this type of training grant if the students are interested not just in the bioinformatics aspect, but combining it with the clinical dimension. But of course, there are students on other parts of campus that also fit this very well, students from computer science or other types of departments where they're really focusing on these type of big clinical big data problems. So in terms of the training, we really thought we would build upon some of the existing bioinformatics training that already exists, which involves courses such as the algorithm course that Chris just mentioned, so it's an introduction to bioinformatics algorithms, and then also statistics and so just general bioinformatics concepts. But then the students would build in their second and potentially third years, they would build additional elective areas that were more focused on the clinical side of things. So how to handle clinical data, clinical ontologies, medical records, things like that. And also with a more specific focus on massive data sets. So how do you go beyond just the more traditional bioinformatics data sets to data sets that are significantly bigger? What kind of math and statistical approaches do you need to do that? And then some additional components we've worked into this are these big data challenges. So our plan is to create every year a big data challenge where we present the students with a data set and we ask them to make some predictions of, say, clinical outcome, some concept like that, and then the students all participate and they get scored on the success of their approach for making these predictions. And we also are tightly coupled with this quantitative Computational Biosciences Institute and the retreats associated with that. We also built in a summer internship program where we asked that the students spend at least one summer during the course of their training in doing an internship in an extramural, either in a company or in some something like a national lab or some other institute that exposes them to related but sort of parallel type of work. And also another thing we have going here at UCLA, which is also under this quantitative computational biosciences institute, is something we call the collaboratory, where we basically have set up these mini courses that are taught by our fellows on the basics of data analysis. And so these are taught every week, and they're very popular, especially for biologists here on campus. And so we're working together with this initiative to have some of our trainees transition to give some of these workshops, and also for ones where they might actually benefit from taking these workshops to do that as well. So just to conclude, this is where we just concluded the assignment of our first class of trainees, and so these are the names and their associated projects. Several of these, as I mentioned, are from the bioinformatics graduate program, and some are from computer science and other programs. And as you can sort of kind of guess from the titles of their projects, many of these projects are focused on analysis of large-scale data sets that have a clinical component. So it's really quite diverse. Some of these data sets are the more sequencing-based data sets or epigenomic type data sets. Others are focusing on combining imaging information with sequence-based information, such as, for instance, the radiotranscriptomic analysis of brain tumors. Others are more focused on electronic health records, such as the type of projects that we heard from Wei Wang earlier on. And others are just sort of working directly with clinicians on developing tools to analyze biopsies and try to understand what the constituent cell types within biopsies are using things like gene expression and DNA methylation. So with that, I'll stop.
Just to orient how this is synergistic with the Center of Excellence of BD2K, you could see the two trainees that Matteo has been selected independent of me for being supported are doing work in the Center of Excellence. One of them is Douglas Arneson, who's doing a genomic-based, radius omics-based drug screening for cardiovascular medicine. And then the other one is Justin working with Matt and working with Wei Wang, Professor Wei Wang, working on machine learning.
Hi everyone. I won't be too long here. So this spring we were fortunately contacted by 4 different institutions who are interested in applying for the NIH BD2K Enhancing Diversity in Biomedical Data Science grant, the R25. And ultimately we partnered with 2 institutions, Dr. Han Quinn from Spelman College in Atlanta from the Department of Biology, and Dr. Ashraf Yassin from the Department of Computer Science at Texas A&M Kingsville. Spelman College is a well-known historically black women's college, and it's 85% African American. And Texas A&M Kingsville is a branch of Texas A&M that's in South Texas and is 65% Hispanics. These are both provide great opportunities to reach out to a more more diverse group of students. So our proposals are currently in the advisory council review. So we should get a response in September, and we're excited and we're optimistic about that. And our plan includes hosting undergraduate interns from these institutions over the summer, sharing with them our training materials and modules and our experience we have, and also providing some staff exchange so that UCLA members can make guest lectures at these institutions, and they can come and visit our laboratory and meet with us. So we're really excited about these opportunities, and I'll turn it back to